If you're one of the, I don't know, millions of people out there who've tried to learn a new language, you probably know this feeling, this frustration.
Oh yeah, that moment.
You spent ages studying vocab lists, right? You memorize all the tricky grammar rules, you ace the tests.
Uh-huh. All the academic stuff.
Then you finally get there. You step off the plane in, say, Paris or Tokyo or maybe Bogota, and bam, reality hits.
Yeah. Suddenly you realize you can barely understand what anyone's saying.
Exactly. And when you try to speak, people are constantly asking you to repeat yourself, or they just look confused.
It's that gap, isn't it?
It really is. It's that crushing moment when you think, hang on, I know all these words on paper, but what's coming out of this person's mouth? It sounds nothing like my textbook.
Well, that gap, that gulf between knowing about a language and actually using it, that's exactly what we're digging into today in this deep dive.
Okay.
We're going to challenge that traditional way of learning languages.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the one that puts grammar and vocab lists right at the very beginning.
Right, the standard approach.
Yeah. And our sources today argue pretty strongly that to really get a handle on a new language, the very first thing you have to focus on, like non-negotiably, is sound, pronunciation.
Sound first, before words.
Before you even seriously tackle big lists of words, yes. It's not just about, sounding more like a native. It's way more fundamental. It's about actually building the blueprint for understanding anything at all.
Okay, blueprint for understanding. Explain that a bit more.
Think of it like a mandatory brain tune-up, a neural recalibration maybe. The idea is you have to physically rewire your brain, your ears really, to even perceive these new foreign sounds properly before you overload it with vocabulary and complex sentence structures.
Rewire the brain. That sounds intense.
It is, but it's efficient.
Yeah.
This is actually the kind of accelerated approach you see with certain specialized learners, people who need to get good fast.
Like who?
Well, think about opera singers needing to nail Italian pronunciation for librettos, or military intelligence folks, or even missionaries who have to achieve, really high levels of practical comprehension very quickly.
Ah, right. They can't afford to misunderstand.
Exactly. And often their methods involve learning the sounds of the language, getting the phonetics down. Sometimes before they even formally study the grammar rules, they tune their ears first.
So our mission today, it sounds like we're delivering the technical manual for this brain rewiring.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. We're diving into the really critical steps you need to build that solid sound foundation, the kind that makes everything else, learning words, understanding conversations, much, much faster later on.
Okay. And the goal is to show how getting pronunciation right at the start is the real key to unlocking fluency. And importantly, how to avoid this thing you mentioned earlier, this broken word trap.
Precisely. We need to systematically avoid that trap. Yeah. It's subtle, but it can completely derail your progress. Okay, so the root of this whole broken word problem, it really comes down to how language is usually taught versus how it actually works in the real world.
How so?
Well, the trap happens when you learn a language almost entirely through reading it, focusing just on the written words, the spelling, the orthography.
But wait, isn't the written version like the official version, the stable one? Why would starting there be a problem?
Because written language and spoken language,
Yeah.
they're like two different beasts. And crucially, they change at completely different speeds.
Different speeds.
Yeah. Think about spoken English. It's super dynamic, right? Always changing. New slang pops up, shortcuts happen. Like how going to just naturally became gonna for most people. It's fluid.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
But written language, it's conservative. It changes really slowly. Often, spellings stick around for centuries, reflecting sounds that nobody actually makes anymore.
Right, so if I start learning, say, Spanish or German just by reading books, I'm essentially learning a slightly outdated formal snapshot of it.
Kind of, yeah. While the version people are actually speaking on the street might have already moved on, you're basically creating this disconnect in your head.
A disconnect.
How?
Your brain is forced to manage two separate lists, two lexicons for the same ideas, one list for the words you read, and a totally different list for the sounds you hear.
Wow. Okay, that sounds incredibly inefficient.
It is, and the sources give this perfect, almost painful example involving French. There's this colleague, apparently super well-educated in French philosophy, read tons of classical texts.
Okay.
And she'd read the name of the famous philosopher Descartes. Using English reading rules in her head, she pronounced it, logically as Descartes.
Yeah, that makes sense based on English spelling. Descartes.
Looks right, doesn't it? But then she gets into this academic chat with native French speakers, and they keep talking about someone named Descartes.
Descartes. And she's completely lost. She's thinking, who's Descartes? Is that some other philosopher I haven't heard of? Maybe a student of Descartes? She just couldn't connect the two because
Because
she hadn't internalized one of the absolute bedrock rules of French pronunciation.
Mhm.
You generally don't pronounce the final consonant.
The silent final consonant.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
fundamental.
Hmm.
Usually they're silent. There are exceptions, of course, like the consonants in the word careful, C, R, F, L. Those often are pronounced. Think avec or neuf. But for Descartes, that final S is silent.
So her failure to know that sound rule meant she literally thought Descartes and Descartes were two different people.
Precisely. Her brain filed the written word and the spoken sound as two completely separate entries. Double the mental work, zero benefit. Just confusion.
Okay, I really see the implication now. If you don't get the pronunciation rules down first, the link between spelling and sound, you just keep accumulating these broken words.
Thousands of them, potentially.
Every time you read words like desserts or budgets or maybe terrains in French, they all drop those final consonants, right?
Yep.
So your brain stores the written version, but it's totally disconnected from the sound you actually hear people say.
And that disconnect is like, it's the worst kind of learning debt you can have. Because if the sound of a word feels foreign and wrong, your brain struggles to link it to the spelling you memorized.
So you're stuck trying to learn two separate systems.
You really are. You're forced to memorize the written language and the spoken language almost independently. And when you try to listen, forget it. Your brain just can't match the incoming sounds to the written stuff you stored away. Comprehension basically breaks down. It's like trying to learn two languages at once for the price of one.
And the sources, they seem pretty down on those pronunciation guides you find in textbooks too, right? The ones that try to use English spelling.
Oh, they hate them. They get really animated about it. One source basically says if your textbook tells you that the French greeting bonjour is pronounced bon J-U-R-E, you should just burn the book immediately.
Light chuckle. Okay, that's dramatic, but memorable.
It is. And the point is, if you actually follow that terrible advice, walk into a Parisian cafe and say bon G-A-E. Well, according to the source, you're probably going to get ignored by the waiter for a very long time.
Why is it so bad, though? Bon J-E, it seems sort of close.
Not really, because it tells you to use English mouth movements. That R in GRE is typical English R, right?
All right.
Tip of the tongue up near the teeth.
Yeah.
The French R is totally different. It's way back in the throat, guttural, like a vibration.
Yeah.
The bon part, that crucial nasal vowel sound. Bon doesn't capture it at all. It's just wrong.
So that kind of guide doesn't just not help, it actively teaches you bad habits.
Deeply ingrained bad habits.
Yeah.
Habits that sound really jarring to native speakers, it's actually detrimental.
Okay. So establish the correct sounds first. That's the only way to bridge the gap, to merge those two mental lists, the written and the spoken.
That's the argument, yes. For language learning to become this positive cycle, where reading helps your conversation and conversation helps your reading and writing. That vital link between the words you see and the words you hear has to be solid, and it has to be built early.
And pronunciation training is the tool that forges that link.
Exactly. It prevents that permanent split, that schism between the written word and the spoken reality.
Okay, so we've really nailed the problem of starting with spelling first, that whole broken word disaster, but let's go deeper. You mentioned biology, neurology. The brain itself is working against adult learners. Why is that? Why can't we, as adults, just hear these subtle sound differences that babies seem to pick up effortlessly?
Yeah, it really boils down to brain efficiency. Our adult brains consume a ton of energy, right? So they get incredibly good at filtering out anything they decide is irrelevant noise
Okay.
and foreign language sounds. Initially, they absolutely fall into that irrelevant noise or forgettable category. They sound weird. They don't seem connected to anything meaningful in our lives yet.
Yeah, so the brain just ignores them to save power.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Often completely involuntarily. It's actively filtering out that specific acoustic information just to conserve cognitive resources. It's not that you don't know the sound intellectually. It's that your auditory system is wired to just gloss over it.
Wow. Hardwired to ignore variance.
That's the heart of it. And there's some fascinating research on this, especially those classic experiments with babies and sound distinctions, like the R versus L sound.
Yeah, the one that's famously tricky for Japanese speakers learning English.
Exactly. Now, here's the kicker. A newborn Japanese baby can totally distinguish between R and L, just like an American baby can. They have the hardware.
But that ability doesn't last, does it?
Nope. It's fleeting. The sources confirm this ability starts to fade. It gradually vanishes, somewhere between 6 and 12 months old.
Why? What happens in that window?
That's a critical period. The baby's brain is working overtime, basically collecting statistics about the sounds it hears most often in its environment. If it keeps hearing sounds across that RL spectrum, but only gets reinforcement or meaning attached to one category, like the single liquid sound used in Japanese, it effectively prunes away the neural connections needed to tell the difference.
It optimizes for its native language.
Precisely. It prioritizes the sounds that matter in its world and literally wires itself to ignore variations that don't carry meaning there. It builds a sound filter.
A sound firewall. That's a powerful image. And once that firewall is up, how does that play out when we try to learn a language later?
It leads to this thing called perceptual magnetism. It's like your native language sets up these powerful phonetic magnets for each sound category it uses.
Magnets.
Yeah. So when you hear a new, slightly different foreign sound that's acoustically kind of close to one of your native sounds, your brain just sucks it towards the nearest magnet. It gets perceived as the native sound.
So you literally can't hear the difference, even if it's crucial in the new language.
Exactly. Your brain just lumps it into the closest existing category, making the foreign distinction invisible, or rather, inaudible to you.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's take those Korean T sounds you mentioned. Apparently, globally, there are at least 10 different ways linguists classify T sounds.
10 T's, wow.
Yeah. Now, in English, we make different T's too, like the little puff of air in top that's aspirated versus the T in stop unaspirated. We make the difference, but it never changes the meaning of a word for us, right?
Right. Top is top, stop is stop. The T sounds slightly different, but it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Our English filter just lumps them together. But in Korean, those subtle differences, maybe where your tongue is or whether there's aspiration, they're entirely different sounds, different phonemes. They make completely different words.
So if my English T magnet is active, those two different Korean words might sound identical to me.
They probably will, which makes trying to memorize them or understand someone saying them basically impossible. Not until you break through that filter and learn to actually hear the distinction.
If you can't hear it, you can't store it properly in memory. It's just fuzzy noise.
It's a messy, indescribable blob. Yeah, you can't get a clear handle on it.
Okay, so the brain's filter is strong. It's efficient. It's actively working against us. How on earth do we force this filter to drop? How do we let the necessary sound information get through?
Well, the main practical tool the sources recommend is targeted, consistent practice with minimal pairs.
Minimal pairs, right. Those are
pairs of words in the language you're learning that differ by only one sound, specifically the sound you're struggling to hear. So for an English learner, maybe wrestling with the vowel in ship versus sheep, those are a minimal pair.
Okay. Or for Spanish, maybe the single R versus the rolled R.
Perfect example. Pero versus pero. So the practice is basically like an auditory workout. You listen to these pairs being played randomly, maybe through an app or audio drill.
And you have to identify which one you heard.
Yeah, you test yourself over and over. Which was it? Pero or pero? Ship or sheep? And by forcing your brain to focus on that single point of difference repeatedly, you essentially signal to it, hey, this difference is important. Pay attention.
You're forcing it to create a new category.
Exactly. You're carving out a new neural pathway for that specific sound distinction. You're basically hacking the filter, telling it to let that specific difference through from now on.
And by making the sound meaningful, recognizable, that helps with memory later.
Hugely. Because once you can clearly hear all the individual sounds, the building blocks of a word are no longer foreign or fuzzy. Your memory isn't struggling to hold on to some weird, indescribable noise.
So even a complicated sounding word.
Like that Icelandic example, mjóður, which means mead. It looks complex, right? But if you've trained your ear to recognize each of those 6 or so individual sounds as familiar components, then remembering mjóður is fundamentally no harder than remembering an unusual but pronounceable name in English, like Siohan.
Because the sounds themselves aren't alien anymore.
Exactly. Sound mastery makes the foreign words less abstract, less noisy, and therefore much less forgettable. It prepares the ground for vocabulary to actually stick. Okay, so we've tackled the crucial first step, retraining the ears, getting the input right. But then comes the next big hurdle, the output, training the mouth, actually making these new sounds.
Right. Hearing them is one thing, producing them is another, and it can feel physically really awkward, can't it?
Definitely. It's a real physical challenge. We often think we can just imitate, But some sounds involve muscle movements our mouths just haven't made before. It's not in our muscle memory.
And understanding how to make them often gets buried under, as the sources put it, that impenetrable linguistic jargon.
Yeah, exactly. You read a description like voiceless epiglottal fricative, and well, what do you do with that? It doesn't tell your tongue or throat where to go.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we translate the technical stuff into actual practical mouth movements that a learner can try?
We have to simplify it, relate it back to our own anatomy. Linguists describe sounds using mainly two things, right?
Yep.
Manner of articulation, like how is the air being blocked or restricted, and place of articulation, where in the mouth is that restriction happening.
Okay, manner and place.
So instead of getting bogged down in terms like fricative or epiglottal, a learner needs simpler concepts connected to places they can feel, like dental.
Dental, meaning teeth.
Exactly. A dental sound means your tongue is touching the back of your teeth, like the sound in Spanish, ciudad, or
Velar.
velar.
Where's that?
That's the soft palate, the velum, way at the back of the roof of your mouth.
Yeah.
So a velar sound, like K or G, means the back of your tongue touches there. You can feel these places. You can look in a mirror and see where your tongue goes for sounds you already know.
So it's about mapping the jargon onto physical locations and actions.
Yes. Translating the abstract into the concrete physical. That's key.
But what about learners who already have bad habits ingrained? You know, those really persistent bon jayuries from years ago? Can you ever really erase those?
The sources are pretty blunt about this, basically. No, your old habits, they're kind of permanent. That neural pathway is carved in there somewhere.
Oh, great. So we're stuck with them.
Not exactly stuck. The goal isn't to erase the old path, because you probably can't. The goal is partitioning. You have to consciously, deliberately build new habits in the crevice next door, as one source puts it.
Build new habits next door. I like that.
Yeah. And then, through consistent practice and conscious effort, you always choose the new pathway, your new awesome voice, for every new word and situation. You establish an override. You don't erase the old habit, you just build a better one and choose it consistently.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's get really practical again. How do we physically achieve some of these tricky new sounds, like specific instructions?
Okay, a classic example is mastering new vowel sounds.
Yeah.
Many languages, especially in Europe and Asia, have vowels that just don't exist in standard English. Let's go back to that French vowel sound in words like to, you,
Or
undo.
Right, the U sound.
Yeah. So here's the physical instruction. First, say the English vowel oo, like in boo. Notice how your lips make a tight, round circle?
Uh-huh. Rounded lips.
Okay. Now keep your lips exactly like that. Same tight circle, same position. Don't move them. But now, inside your mouth, try to make the sound E, as in C.
Okay. Lips. Ooh, sound E. Tries. Ooh, E. Ooh, ew, huh.
What do you feel? What do you hear?
It feels weird. High up in the front of my mouth, but with rounded lips. The sound is definitely not ooh and not E. It's that French sound.
Exactly. You've just physically produced the French oo. It requires combining lip rounding, like oo, with a high front tongue position, like E. It's a muscle coordination most English speakers don't use.
So practice that specific combination around lips E, tongue builds the muscle memory for that new sound.
Precisely. You turn the abstract sound into a repeatable physical action. That's how you conquer new phonemes with your mouth.
Okay, mouth trained, ears trained, but we still have the messy spelling issue. How do we connect these newly mastered sounds back to the often confusing, inconsistent way words are written? How do we find the patterns in the chaos?
This is where the real efficiency gains kick in. Because every language, no matter how messy its spelling looks, does have predictable patterns linking spelling to sound. They might be complex, sure, but they exist.
And learning those patterns is the key.
It's the key to exponential learning. Once you internalize the system, the patterns, all your future learning becomes easier. You're building this interconnected web in your brain, not just trying to memorize thousands of separate, isolated facts.
Can you give a concrete example of how these connections build on each other?
Let's stick with French again. Say you learn that the spelling A with the grave accent in the word mère, mother, makes that simple A sound, like in English bet.
Okay, mère is A. One fact, one connection.
Right. But then you learn that the two-letter spelling A in the word late, milk, is also pronounced A.
Late also A. Okay.
Now look what happened. You didn't just learn one new fact, AI equals A. You actually built 3 crucial connections in your brain.
3. How?
Well, the sound A now connects to the spelling A in late. The sound A still connects to the spelling A in mare. But crucially, The word late now connects directly to the word mare because they share the same internalized sound pattern, A.
Ah, they link up through the sound.
Exactly. And that's the power the sources talk about. When multiple concept spellings, words get linked by a shared understood pattern, the neurons for all of them fire together, they reinforce each other. It makes remembering all of them much, much easier and faster than just drilling isolated word lists.
Okay, that sounds powerful. But it also sounds like it requires a really systematic approach to figure out all those patterns. What tools do we need? How do we do this scientifically?
The number one indispensable tool recommended is the International Phonetic Alphabet, the IPA.
Right, the IPA. I've seen those symbols. They look kind of intimidating.
They can seem that way at first, yeah. But the beauty of the IPA is that every single symbol represents one specific sound, consistently, across all languages. If you learn to read IPA, you can look up any word in a dictionary that uses it and know exactly how it should sound.
Okay, so it gives you the correct sound, but how does it help with making the sound, like we talked about earlier?
Because the IPA chart itself is organized based on how sounds are made. Remember manner and place of articulation.
Yeah, how the air is blocked and where in the mouth.
The IPA consonant chart lays this out visually. The columns usually show the place bilabial, lips, dental teeth, velar, soft palate, etc. The rows show the manner stop, air fully blocked. Fricative, air partially blocked, causes friction. Nasal, air through the nose.
So each symbol's position on the chart is basically an instruction.
Exactly. A symbol in the velar stop box tells you. Back of the tongue touches the soft palate, block the air completely, then release. It's the hidden instruction manual for your mouth, translated from the jargon. Same for vowels, the chart shows tongue height and backness.
Okay, the IPA is the key decoder ring. Once we can read that, what's next? How do we drill these patterns?
Technology comes in handy here. The sources strongly advocate using spaced repetition systems. SRS, basically smart flashcard software like Anki.
SRS for sounds. How does that work?
You create flashcards for every single spelling-to-sound pattern you identify in the language. You approach it from multiple angles on each card. You see the spelling, you hear the sound using audio recordings, and maybe you even include the IPA symbol and a note about the mouth position.
So you're hitting the pattern from sight, sound, and physical instruction all at once.
Precisely. You drill these cards using the SRS algorithm, which shows you the patterns you're weak on more often until they're burned into your memory.
Now hang on, you mentioned earlier, for some languages, this could mean creating like 80 cards for Spanish, maybe up to 240 for Japanese spelling patterns. That sounds like a huge amount of upfront work. Doesn't that contradict the idea of getting fluent faster?
It seems like it at first glance, right. But think about the return on investment. The sources argue this isn't a burden. It's a crucial time-saving investment.
How so?
Designing those cards might take, maybe a few focused hours? Identifying all the rules and learning them with SRS. Maybe 30 minutes a day for a week or two, maybe 3 to 8 days total, depending on complexity.
Okay.
Now, compare that small, focused upfront effort, maybe 10, 15 hours total, to the alternative. Spending years constantly second-guessing pronunciation, mishearing words, having to look up or correct thousands of individual words because you never learned the underlying system.
So investing those few days up front saves potentially hundreds of hours of confusion and correction down the line.
Exactly. It prevents that endless accumulation of broken words. It sets you up for smooth sailing later. It's arguably the single most efficient thing you can do to accelerate your path to fluency. All right, so we've got the ears tuned, the mouth trained, the spelling patterns mapped. Now, let's connect all this back to the bigger picture. Actual fluency, remembering vocabulary long-term, and understanding easily.
Yeah, because the ultimate goal isn't just perfect pronunciation and isolation, right? It's communication.
Exactly. And the core challenge with vocabulary is simple. Foreign words, initially, are just abstract sounds. They're inherently forgettable because they don't mean anything to us yet.
Right. And we know from memory research that things stick better when they're connected to something meaningful. Images, emotions, personal experiences.
Precisely. And here's where the sound mastery pays off big time. If the sound of a word is no longer foreign or weird because you've internalized the whole sound system, then it becomes much, much easier to attach that now familiar sound to things that do have meaning, like pictures or concepts or personal memories.
So getting the sound right makes the word less abstract.
Immensely so. The sources mention studies showing that linking a new word to, say, a vivid mental image or a personal connection, maybe picturing your childhood pet, can boost your memory retention for that word by like 50% or more, compared to just trying to memorize a translation.
50%, that's huge.
It is. By conquering the sound system first, you're making every new word you encounter inherently less abstract, less forgettable, and much more ready to be anchored to these powerful memory hooks.
Okay, so the sounds are locked in. What's the very next step then, according to this approach? How do we build that initial vocabulary base efficiently?
The path recommended is very structured, and crucially, it avoids relying on translation. The suggestion is to start with a core foundation of about 625 basic, concrete, high-frequency words.
625 words? Like what kind of words?
The real building blocks? Simple nouns you can picture, like house, dog, apple, water. Simple verbs for basic actions: eat, run, see, go. Basic adjectives: big, small, red, good, things you can easily visualize.
And the key is how you learn them, right? You said no translation, so pictures.
Pictures, yes. Or maybe even acting them out. The absolute key is to bypass your native language entirely during this initial stage. You want to avoid what's sometimes called the internal translation loop.
Internal translation loop, what's that?
It's what happens when a beginner sees, say, the Spanish word manzana, and they're taught to just translate it mentally to apple. Their brain develops this little three-step process every single time. Hear, see, manzana, think apple, English word. Access the mental concept of the fruit.
Okay, I see the delay there. 3 steps.
Right, it's slow and clunky. But if you learn manzana by directly associating it with a picture of an apple, you forge a direct two-step link. Hear, see, manzana, access the mental concept of the fruit.
You cut out the middleman, the English word.
Exactly. You force your brain to start thinking directly in the target language from the very beginning, even if it's just for simple concepts. And that direct connection is the foundation of fluency. You eliminate that lag caused by constantly routing everything through your native tongue's dictionary.
Okay, so we build this foundation, 625 concrete words, learned visually with the sounds already mastered. How does having that base make learning grammar easier? Because grammar is usually the really scary part for people.
It makes grammar dramatically less intimidating. Because once you have those basic building blocks, the common nouns, verbs, adjectives, you already know most of the players and actions involved. When you start looking at sentences, you have the raw materials.
So when you see a sentence,
Like, my dog chased a cat up a tree. If you already comfortably know the words dog, chase, cat, up, tree, and they sound right to you, then figuring out the grammar isn't this overwhelming task of juggling unknown words and unknown rules simultaneously.
the grammar just tells you how the known pieces fit together.
Exactly. Grammar becomes about understanding the relationships, who's doing what to whom, the order, the modifications. It tells you who's chasing whom. You're just learning the rules of the game using pieces you already recognize and can pronounce. The cognitive load is so much lower.
That makes a lot of sense. You're isolating the difficulty. But learning isn't just input, right? Eventually, we have to actually produce language, speak or write. What's the strategy for improving output, especially early on?
The main strategy emphasized is actually using writing as a tool to generate the absolute best kind of personalized input.
Writing to get input. How does that work?
The idea is you try to write in the language you're learning, express your own thoughts, tell a story, describe something. Then you actively seek out corrections from native speakers. There are platforms online for this, language exchange sites like Lang8 or getting feedback from tutors on Italki.
So you write something, a native speaker corrects it.
And that correction is gold, because it's not just random input, it's input directly targeted at the mistakes you were making, based on thoughts you were trying to express.
So the goal isn't to write perfectly from the start.
Not at all. The goal is actually to make mistakes. Make them frequently. Try to say what you want with the words and grammar you know. If you get stuck, maybe use a translator just to find that one missing word or phrase to complete your thought, then get it corrected.
And that corrected text becomes your learning material.
The best kind of learning material, according to the sources, because it's completely personalized, addressing your specific weaknesses, and it's based on your own ideas, which makes the corrections much more memorable and kind of emotionally relevant.
Okay. And finally, let's say we've progressed. We're reading more complex stuff now, maybe for pleasure or work. How do we keep integrating sound to really nail the natural rhythm and flow of the language?
This is where audiobooks become really valuable, especially listening to audiobooks while reading the corresponding text.
Listening and reading simultaneously.
Yeah. And the recommendation is often to start with a story you're already familiar with. Maybe it's a book you loved in translation, or the novelization of a movie you've seen a bunch of times.
Why a familiar story?
Because it provides context. You already know the plot and characters, so your brain isn't struggling with comprehension and language at the same time. You can focus more on how things are being said.
And the audiobook part.
The audiobook is crucial for picking up the natural rhythm, the intonation, the melody of the spoken language, and importantly, how words sound when they're all squished together in rapid connected speech.
Ah, right. Because words don't sound the same in isolation as they do in a fast sentence. Things get dropped or blended.
Exactly. Phenomena like elision, where sounds disappear between words, or assimilation, where sounds change based on their neighbors. You only really internalize those patterns by hearing hours of natural speech.
So listening to maybe 12, 18 hours of an audiobook while following along with the text, that trains your ear for real-world speed and flow.
It really does. It helps your brain anticipate how known words will morph and connect in natural conversation. It extends your sound mastery beyond single words into the realm of fluent, connected discourse.
It all comes back to sound, doesn't it? And engaging multiple senses, sight, sound, context, even the physical mouth movements we discussed.
The more pathways you engage, the stickier the learning becomes. Hashtag tag outro.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given me a lot to think about. It feels like it's really turned that traditional language learning pyramid upside down, doesn't it?
It really challenges the old grammar and vocab first model, yeah.
The big takeaway seems crystal clear. Getting fluent isn't just about cramming more words into your head through sheer force of will. It's much more about smart, strategic preparation. And that preparation starts with sound.
Absolutely. Systematically training your ears to truly hear the new sounds, training your mouth to physically make them. It builds this core foundation.
And that foundation makes everything else smoother. Vocabulary sticks better, understanding conversations feels more natural, grammar makes more sense.
It streamlines the whole process.
Yeah.
And the benefits go way beyond just communicating more effectively. There are some really profound cognitive advantages, too.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, study after study shows that bilingual brains are just more resilient. They seem to resist the cognitive decline associated with aging much better.
More resilient how?
There's a measurable delay in the onset of conditions like dementia and Alzheimer's disease. On average, bilinguals tend to show symptoms about 5 years later than people who only speak one language. Learning and using another language genuinely seems to fortify the brain.
Wow, 5 years is significant. So learning a language is like brain insurance.
Kind of. It builds cognitive reserve. It's a serious workout for your neurons.
Okay, so to wrap up, there's that quote from the philosopher Wittgenstein you mentioned earlier.
Ah, yes. Uttering a word is like striking a note on the keyboard of the imagination.
I like that. Vocabulary is a keyboard for thought.
It's a lovely metaphor, isn't it? So if vocabulary is that keyboard, and our goal is to compose these rich symphonies of thought and communication in a new language,
Then the question becomes,
what kind of music can you create if every single key on that keyboard, every sound, every foam, every word form is perfectly tuned and ready to respond instantly, if nothing is broken or fuzzy?
a perfectly tuned instrument.
So the final thought for you, the listener, is this. Which specific key sound in the language you're learning or want to learn will you focus on mastering first? Which challenging vowel or tricky consonant will you tune up right now so you can begin composing your own unique symphony?
That's the challenge. Find your first key and tune it perfectly. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.